We're just 9 days away from the election, and former President Trump is still battling a full slate of legal challenges on everything from election interference to appealing the verdict of his civil fraud trial. So what happens to those cases if he's elected president? Let's ask former Whitewater Deputy Independent Counsel and Fox News contributor Sol Wisenberg. Sol, thanks for being with us this morning. Overarching, Donald Trump is elected president. What happens to all of these cases?
Well, let's start with the federal cases. He has the authority to ask his attorney general to order his attorney general to fire Jack Smith and to dismiss the federal case in D.C. and the federal case in Florida. The problem is he's not going to have his team in place at DOJ right away. They're going to be holdovers there. So what he needs to do is have in waiting a qualified acting attorney general he can appoint and then put those steps into motion. Because, you know, the Senate's jealous of its prerogatives. It typically does not confirm appointments right away. So what happens then? What happens if Trump has an acting attorney general in there who does fire Jack Smith and move to dismiss these cases? Well, it ain't over yet. Judge Cannon in Florida, federal judge, we can expect her to agree to DOJ's motion to dismiss. They can't just say, we dismiss, it's in court. So she'll have to approve that with an order. She'll do it, I think. But Judge Chutkan in D.C. is unlikely to do that. If you recall, when Bill Barr moved to dismiss the indictment against Michael Flynn, rightfully so in my opinion, the judge there, Emmett Sullivan, refused to do it. And so Flynn had to be pardoned ultimately before Trump left office. So it'll be litigated, I think, ultimately. President Trump will win that, but it won't be quick and easy.
It won't go through dismissal, you're saying. It'll be litigated. Being a sitting president actually wouldn't change the equation in that particular case, even if you were able to get Jack Smith replaced. That's the federal trials. Go to the state side, because there's a couple of those as well, most notably right here in New York.
Well, obviously, he's got a lot less influence over the state cases. He can't just go in and order the state to dismiss the cases. However, right now, he's got statutory and constitutional issues being litigated. In the New York case, where the verdict was against him, and in the Georgia case, it hasn't gone to trial yet. But even assuming that he loses his constitutional and statutory arguments there, it's hard for me to believe that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to let a sitting president have to undergo, while he is president, a lengthy Georgia state criminal RICO trial. And certainly, I don't believe that that the Supreme Court will allow, while Trump is president, any state process to put him in prison, which was what would potentially happen in New York State.
Really quickly,
so he's in a much better position.
Clearly in a much better position, but it doesn't just magically disappear, to your point, neither in the state cases or even in the federal case in Washington, D.C. So just worst case scenario, Saul, these cases continue. He's convicted in a state court, perhaps, but he's sitting president of the United States. How does the Supreme Court intervene? To your point, they wouldn't allow this. What's the mechanism for the Supreme Court to go, no, you're not doing this with a sitting president?
Well, somebody's got to litigate it and try to bring it to the Supreme Court, but Trump's lawyers have shown that they don't have any problem doing that. Now, keep in mind, don't forget also, even under Trump versus Anderson, the ballot case where they tried to take him off the ballot as an insurrectionist, Supreme Court left open the possibility that Congress, before Trump takes office, or even before he takes office, but after the new Congress is there, depending on who controls Congress, Congress could enact a mechanism to say that Trump was an insurrectionist. That's unlikely, but if the Democrats control the Congress, they can, under the 14th Amendment, set up a process whereby there could be a finding that Trump engaged in insurrection and then try to keep him from taking office.
Okay, we still have an election. That's the big hurdle we're talking about, these presumptions under the scenario that Trump wins the presidency. Let's get through that first. Sol Wisenberg.